Well, this is not a random, exactly a random list, but I'm not ordering them in order of importance. I will first talk about people that I directly work with and that I consider very important, and that's James W. Sperry, a chemist who turned out to be well, what I would call a mad genius in the best sense of the word, that designed applications of information retrieval in machines. He actually built a computer, and then he also patented a number of circuits for Boolean searching of computers. At that time, that wasn't there. Today, we take it for granted, but Boolean searching was invented. It didn't come from the top. And just so happens, here is another anecdote, that Western Reserve had the patents. He worked there, and then General Electric got into business of producing computers, and they contracted to produce a computer called GE250, which was specifically oriented toward information retrieval, and what was then called machine literature searching. And patents from James W. Sperry were incorporated in that computer. So as a result, we got serial number 2 of a machine that was actually a General Electric 225, which is a general computing machine. Serial number 1, I understand, never worked. So in that sense, he was pioneering not only in developing of systems, but he was also pioneering in technology. Here's an anecdote about James W. Sperry. Is he built a searching selector, and there are pictures of that searching selector in pioneering books by Becker and Hayes, which was really a tape selector. It was a relay machine. At that time, there were no circuits. So it was a huge machine, and he was soldering all these little relays and all that kind of together. And then decided to make a marketing film for the machine and for the system. But in Cleveland, Ohio, where that was, there was no filming unit that will do that. So they put the whole searching selector on a truck and went to Pittsburgh. And he was holding it from Cleveland to Pittsburgh on the machine. Of course, when they unloaded it, many of the circuits were unsoldered. So he was soldering the thing and then filming the thing. Other pioneers there, also working at the center, was Alan Kent. Alan Kent was probably the greatest genius in getting grants for information retrieval and promoting it not only nationwide but worldwide, and also nationwide to politicians that ever existed. I would mention a few other. Calvin Wurz, who was actually Calvin Wurz was the person who coined the term information retrieval. It didn't exist before in 1951 in an article that appeared later in American Documentation. Before that, in some mathematical proceedings, he coined the term information retrieval, and he did the same thing that Bush did. He described what the problem is that they addressed, and how does it address it. He said that information retrieval is activity that deals with intellectual organization of information, of how to search it intellectually, and what systems and techniques to use it. If we consider that, that's what information retrieval does today, with an addition. And the addition being that today we use it interactively. Other pioneers, Mortimer Taubbe, a very flashy person. I saw him only once in a conference as a lowly student. I went to a conference in Chicago. They sent me there. And he had diamond handcuffs and a diamond on his tie. And he smoked cigars and spoke with a booming voice and a big mustache and a big hair. And, I mean, when he came in the room, he was the guy who started Documentation Inc., a company that eventually became quite prosperous, and probably the first, I think his origin is librarian, first librarian that became a millionaire. Unfortunately, he died relatively early of a heart attack. Maybe he moved too much. He was the guy who invented unit terms, and he was the guy who actually invented coordinate indexing. I shouldn't say that he was among the guys, but his presentation was so that he was the most popular ones. Cyril Cleverton was the first one to actually test these retrievals. No, I shouldn't say the first one. There were tests before Cleverton, but he was first to test it systematically. And the way that became around is Cyril Cleverton was a librarian and an aeronautic engineer in the aeronautical school in Cranfield in England. And all these systems started appearing, and Taube and Perry and Moores, who invented a system called data coding, and everybody claimed my system is the best, of course. So there was a woman who was also a great pioneer at NSF, Helen Brownson, and she said, "Well, okay, let's test that. Let's see it." So there was nobody in the States who actually, I don't know if Helen Brownson didn't trust anybody, or if there was actually nobody who was into testing. So she got Cyril Cleverton. Cyril Cleverton got testing the systems, and he became quite famous in that. And he brought a testing methodology. He put together a testing methodology, which, interestingly enough, after when he started late 50s, worked the Cranfield projects in the 60s, and today they're in the 90s, and the TREC system, the Text Retrieval Conference, the systems, you know whose methodologies they're using? Cyril Cleverton's. The Cranfield methodology in its basic form is still being used. That's what I call a pioneer. You want an anecdote about Cyril Cleverton? Well, later on, we became great friends. I was a student. I came to the United States in 1959. I spoke some English then. I started working. My background is electrical engineering from Croatia, and I started working in a factory in Cleveland Twist Mill. It made twist mills. So I worked on all kinds of electrical engineering projects, building machines. I actually built them with my hands. And electrical components of machines, and testing them, and repairing them, and all that kind of stuff. That time, that company got a computer. I remember what it was, RCA 501. I think all these computers exist, if they do, in the Boston Computer Museum. All these companies are out of computer business. And anyhow, I fell in love with that computer, and I said, how can I go and study something like that? And long later on, I fell out of love with computers. I used them, but my love affair is over with them. And I found out that there was a place called Center for Documentation and Communication Research, through which I would get a degree and work with computers. So I went there, and one of my friends, a Croatian friends, graduated there, and then said, "This is in the library school." And I said, "Library school? What do you mean? I have to go to a library to get that degree?" And eventually I'm happy that I did, because it broadened my outlook way more than if I was strictly engineering. But the engineering school at Western Reserve University then, or at Case Institute of Technology, or any university at that time, didn't have a computer. They didn't teach a computer. There was no computer except that one computer on the campus. So I went and studied it there. So I was still a student, and there was a conference. One of the things that center did with Perry and Kant, they had conferences, world-famous conferences, series of them, about 10 or so of them, in the late 50s and early 60s. And in one of the conferences, there was talk about retrieval, so about tests of retrieval. So Cyril Cleverton was invited. And huge argument between, at that time, these pioneers were so arguing with each other. They were good friends. They went drinking, at that time they drank martinis like you wouldn't believe it. Anyhow, but they argued in booming voices, in loud things, and so on. So the conference was great fun, much more fun than today, but nobody argues. So here was Cyril Cleverton, came there, and I was as a student standing behind, and they was arguing because Cyril found out that Western Reserve System doesn't perform any better than some other system, which was a big shot. And there were all the big shots from the center, and I was behind them as a student, and they talked about Cyril and said, how can he do that? How can he do that? And Jessica Melton was also among the pioneers. Said that she wondered, but the Cyril Cleverton has really a stiff upper lip. He was sick, and he had a stiff upper lip. Well, I was only 3 years in the States, and I knew a lot of English and idioms, but that idiom was not exactly one that I was familiar with. So the next morning, I kind of snuck up to Cyril and kind of looked what happened to his lip. That was so stiff, and I couldn't notice anything anyhow. So Cyril was one of the pioneers. Madeline Berry, who died fairly early, was a pioneer. Okay, and the greatest, I think, pioneer is Hans-Peter Loon. Unfortunately, I never met him. His last work was to organize the 1963 Conference of American Society for Information Science, at that time American Documentation Institute, in Chicago, and he published the proceedings, and these were the first proceedings that had a computer-generated index, a keyword index, and shortly thereafter he died, relatively young. His contribution was both theoretical and practical. He worked for IBM, but he was the one who invented a number of things which we today consider completely normal, and nobody even considered that somebody had to invent them. Keyword indexing is one. He was the first one who proposed that we can summarize, and he carried, for every proposal he carried experiments. Summarize and create abstracts out of text automatically. He invented the selective dissemination of information, which today on various guides appears on the web or in every place else. So his intellectual contribution and practical contribution was probably, if I have to judge all the pioneers, the highest.